high standards in reading and writing at proficiency. So that leads us to one of the leading indicators is by the end of third grade, are you reading at grade level or not? To know if you, it's a strong predictor of ninth grade course performance and high school performance in general, of graduation and completion of high school, but also college attendance. So it has a lasting impact, that strong foundational skill building that happens in that 0 to 8 space. And what we often now are seeing, and what we're really trying to message with communities, is that language is the precursor to literacy. So it doesn't just start in kindergarten when you start to learn the decoding techniques and things like that. It's actually that early language skills are directly related to early reading success and performance. And so language is the precursor to reading. And that language matters, and that language matters not just the amount we heard. I think a number of you have probably heard the Beasley study, the 30 million word gap, but it's not just the amount, but it's the quality that matters in language. So that interactive conversation that is so important. So the diversity of words, which is why reading becomes a great technique for that. Because when you're being read to, there are words that you're exposed to that you're not exposed to when you have a daily conversation in your home or school or whatever setting you may find yourself in. So we're really talking about the power of language development and then pre-literacy skill development that happens. Preschoolers whose parents read and talk and sing with them come with a stronger sort of foundation of vocabulary and therefore are set up for success, and it's easier for them to become better readers. Which then leads us to sort of where we see some of the gaps in Arizona and what we've been really focused on in the last few years with the Read on Arizona work. There's disparities in language development that start actually as early, we can start to know if a child's behind in infancy, and then it just gets wider by even when they're 2 or 3, we know that they possibly have some language delays. Low-income children entering kindergarten are typically 12 to 14 months behind. So coming into school, you're already behind. That's such a missed opportunity that there are things we can do to balance that out. And that nearly 40% of incoming kindergartners nationwide don't have the basic language skills that they need to learn to read. And in Arizona, we have a set of circumstances that make it even more challenging. So that means just an opportunity for us to really dig in. 3 out of 4 fourth graders in Arizona cannot read proficiently according to our national standards, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP scores. So this is how we can sort of say how we're doing compared to other states and other kids across the country. 85% of our low-income children are reading below proficiency. So we also know it is sometimes a matter of what they have access to and what opportunities they've had along the way as they've developed. And then in last year's school year was the first year of implementing our Move On When Reading third grade retention legislation that can possibly identify and limit a child being promoted to the third grade depending on what they score on the state readings test. And if they score in the falls far below category and don't qualify for any certain exemptions. So I just thought to give us all a little grounding, this is a great slide that the Department of Ed has done with showing you where over the course of since 2010 we're making progress and where we sort of maybe plateaued as far as our state reading assessment. So that falls far below category over here, you can actually see, in 2010 we had 6% of our students and now we have 3%, so we've cut that in half. That's a significant accomplishment. We should be really, our approaches, students have kind of sort of hovered in the 21 in 2010 down to 20, but we keep sort of saying, and the approaching category is about a little over 20,000 kids. And here's where we should be shouting the progress we've made, because we've actually, since 2010, made a 6% increase of getting kids to meet proficiency, and that's no insignificant accomplishment. So there is some good work that's happening, and it's and we're making some good progress. And here's where we could push ourselves, because our kids that are scoring the exceeds category has really just hovered around 13 in 2010, and we're still just at 12% in 2014. And honestly, we want this to be up here, because as we really need our kids to develop those kinds of skills that they'll be ready for college and they'll be ready for the kinds of careers that they want, we need that to be a much bigger number. And then when you look at it by subgroup, we also have some interesting disparities or interesting things that show up. And it's not too much of a surprise that some of our most significant subgroups that need support and more help are in some of these that you would say, that makes sense. There are free and reduced lunch category and our Native American subgroup, and also probably the English language learners. All of these take a different kinds of strategies to really help them to make the kind of progress that they can. They have the potential to make. They just need the, as my elevator pitch is, they need the right program at the right time for that job. And the better we get at doing that, then you'll see those kids perform where we need them to perform. So I just wanted to kind of set the context for, we do have an early literacy crisis here in Arizona, and that's why literacy needs to start to be thought of as something that there isn't anyone that can't plug into that work and help with that work, whether you're a health funder, whether you're an economic development funder, whether you're, it is an education issue, but it's everyone's challenge. So we really want to share with you a little bit of how we've structured Read on Arizona to start to help to frame that and some of the exciting work that's happening. So when I was lucky enough to be appointed to as the state literacy director just a few years ago, one of the things that we wanted to do was sort of build the tent that everybody could see themselves under. So we call the literacy tent in Arizona Read on Arizona, and we really do say it's sort of the umbrella tent that anyone worried about literacy, working in literacy and education, should be able to see themselves under that tent. And it's a statewide public-private collaboration of a number of agencies, nonprofits, foundations, and community partners and stakeholders that are all working toward making an effective system of early literacy early literacy system for kids 0 to 8 that are improving outcomes in language and literacy. So we have state level work that's happening, and state agencies and other partners that have the entire state as their focus area are working with us on a number of different things that you'll hear a little bit about later on. But we also know that it takes some local and really kind of grassroots efforts. So the way we've structured Read on Arizona is that Read on communities can apply to become a Read on community. And the thing that they have to do is help develop a collaborative in their community that's focused on early literacy and start to identify some key strategies and outcomes and set some goals for their work. And we started with 4. Phoenix, Flagstaff, Tucson, and Yuma was the original 4, and we've now grown to 19 Read on communities across the state, and some of them are countywide, which is really actually surprising because we don't make it easy for them to become a Read on community. They have to then go through the painstaking process of including all of those small towns in that county and getting their districts and partners on board. And when we say apply for to be a Read on community, we say there are certain partners that have to be at the table. So it isn't just one entity in a community says, yeah, that sounds like fun and it'll look good and we can have that logo on our. They actually have to get their school district and their early child care sites and their Head Start sites and their library and their leadership, whether that's at the town or city level or county level, to all agree to work together in this process. And so, like I said, so the fact that we've now got 19 and about a half dozen more in the pipeline is telling us how important this issue is at a community level. And they're all focused on doing a couple key things. They look at what's already happening in their community and where good work is happening and where they're making progress. and then they're looking at where are the gaps and what kinds of strategies would be good to fill those gaps. And then they come up with that plan together and move forward, and they're sharing and leveraging resources and best practices and expertise. So it's exciting to see what's developing there. This is just a kind of at a glance list of partners that have signed on to be helpful with, oops, sorry, it's got a mind of its own today, with Read On, and you can see it's a wide variety, and this is always out of date as soon as we update it. So, but there's a tremendous amount of collaboration going on behind the scenes. Everybody always says, I'm just the lucky person that gets to shout about the partnerships and the collaboration that's happening. This is, there's over 400 and some partners involved. But what that did do was, that under that literacy tent, we all agreed there were some key goals that all of us had in common and all of us wanted to see happen. And one is that we had all students graduating college and career ready. Two is that we had all students reading at grade level by the end of third grade. And then the third is all students entering school ready to learn. So each and every one of those is a significant and ambitious, but with the kinds of partnerships, like I said, we're really encouraging that they get good at what they do in their wheelhouse, and then just connecting to others that help them leverage it. So what I tried to do was also, we have those three goals. Now we need to really sort of paint the picture of what does an early literacy model system look like? What do you need to have? What are sort of the non-negotiables that you need to have to know that you're going to make progress, or to sort of hedge your bet? So one of the pillars is in the states and in the communities where we have seen the most progress, they sort of have certain things that are just a given. And one is language-rich and engaging curricula that's coordinated for impact. So I sort of say that's our quality and dosage kind of measurement. So you can have a great quality program, evidence-based, but if you're not doing it in the dosage that you need to, so say take, for instance, a tutoring program, it might only be meeting with a student for 30 minutes a week, and evidence shows that that's not enough time to really make progress. So when you actually increase the amount of time you're working with that student, you exponentially then start to see better outcomes. So we've had a great experience down in southern Arizona. There was a very strong tutoring program, and we talked to them about could they increase the time that they were spending with students, and they're seeing better outcomes now because of that. So we didn't ask them to do anything different except for increase the time. Ongoing assessments and screenings as early as possible. This again is where almost anyone can plug in, because when we talk about screening assessments, it's just not an assessment about how well a child is or isn't reading. It can be developmental assessments, health assessments, screenings, vision, and other things that have to happen at key times to make sure that a child's even really ready to be willing, and able to learn to read. So if they're having health issues, asthma, dental, things like that, and missing a lot of school, that can have a huge impact on why they're not reading at grade level. So, so we really look to almost thinking about it as a continuum. What needs to happen and when? Capacity building models around professional development. There is more that we now know about how to teach reading than ever before, and so we really need to make sure that not just our educators know some of these tools and tricks of the trade, but that our any adult in the life of a child can learn and understand a little bit more what science has told us about language and literacy development, and be better equipped to help with that. So, so there's some great professional development. ADE has a wonderful training. You'll hear a little bit more about teaching reading effectively that they're really rolling out with educators that will have a huge impact on our capacity. And then last, if there is a silver bullet for literacy, I think it's the family role. And so family engagement becomes something that's important. And not just telling them how important it is to read with your child and talk with your child, but really giving them some tools and trade secrets on what that looks like and how to incorporate that on an ongoing basis. So, so we have a strong I sort of say those are all plates that need to be spinning at the same time. And if you have one plate, that's great. And then how do you add the second one? And then how the third? And how do you keep them spinning? And that's really what's going to get us to the third grade reading proficiency. So we identified our goals. We've identified our pillars of how we want to get there. What we also identified were some of the challenges and then some solutions that we've brought to help with those. Lack of information and critical factors that prevent solutions. So we noticed that nonprofits and practitioners didn't always have access to the data that they should be looking at to really understand what, how they could choose strategies that would help. So we've put together a data integration and systems linkage task force that's doing some great work on making sure that that kind of data is available to them. Lack of communication and coordination between efforts. So that's all those read-on communities that you saw, that's become a real network so that they're sharing best practices and they're collaborating with each other, learning from each other how to fill the early literacy gaps. Certainly there's too little awareness and attention that's given to early literacy, and we've really tried to be a strong advocate for helping to build awareness and engagement, and we've actually created tools and toolkits and social media kits and some other key marketing efforts that all of our communities now can tap into to help them spread that word, and that's been really helpful. And then insufficient access to programs that work. So we often don't know, something sounds good and it's getting books in the hands of kids, and that can't be a bad thing, but it can be a much more effective thing if it's done in a certain sequence or if it's done with certain parent training, caregiver training. So we actually pulled together a task force and had them work for the last 18 months on what we call the continuum of effective literacy practices that really outlines what are the key components that need to happen at every age from birth through the end of third grade in all of those 4 pillar areas that I just outlined for you. And we're having agencies and partners train their staff on that and really helping to, again, raise the capacity of the field in general. So this is what the cover looks like. I think there's a copy in the folders for you to take a little deeper dive, but just as you can see, it covers some of those key pillars and then we threw in a couple extra because we knew that there were certain areas that people were looking at, or there was a lot of work going on, but it wasn't coordinated, and we wanted to give people a little bit better frame around how to engage volunteers, for example. Technology has become a very big thing, but it's not always used in the best way, and so we wanted to really spend a little time talking about how to leverage that a bit better. And then transitions are important, and not just the transition into kindergarten or out of kindergarten into first grade, but the transition at every time in the child's life. So summer becomes a really critical time that can be utilized. If we think about that as an ongoing transition. This is one of my favorite pictures because this really shows you what we're talking about. These are the kids at every age on the continuum that we have been that we have said that's that critical 8 year. It takes 8 years to make a reader, and here are critical milestones that they possibly should be hitting, and then here are things that adults in various ways adults can actually what they can do to help and that support their language and literacy development. But this is our continuum, and it just helped me, and it helps us talk about the work when we started to put faces to those ages and not just talk about them in a sort of big group setting. So this is something that's available as a separate standalone piece, and it has been being used in childcare sites and libraries and all sorts of educational settings.